In terms of Canada's overall fiscal picture, we're looking at more of the same, which is a slow return to balance over something like 7 to 10 years.
The Midweek Exchange is back after a short break. I'm Natalie Nanowski, and we're here to explain those big economic issues and how they could impact your life. As always, Brett House is here. He's Scotiabank's VP and Deputy Chief Economist. Nice to see you, Brett, after about a 2 week vacay.
It's good to be speaking about the Canadian economy again, Natalie. There's a lot going on.
Right. And one of the big things was the election. Now, election day has come and gone, and the results are basically what we had before. We're looking at another liberal minority government. What does this mean for Canada's economic recovery? And should we expect to see anything different than what we were expecting to see pre election?
Well, the good news is Canada's economic recovery remains on track. We had a bit of a hiccup in the second quarter of this year with slower growth than we expected, but we still got to the point where overall economic activity hit more or less on par with where it was prior to the election. We've had slower recovery in jobs, but those continue to see some gains. In terms of the election results, what's interesting to know is that the party platforms across all three major political groups promised more or less a continuation of what the Liberal government had laid out for us in its spring budget in terms of overall levels of spending, deficits, and new debt. Of course, some of their priorities were different in terms of how that money got spent, but in terms of Canada's overall fiscal picture, we're looking at more of the same, which is a slow return to balance over something like 7 to 10 years.
So let's dig a little deeper on two issues that the Liberal Party rather promised: affordable housing and $10 a day childcare. Can Canadians expect to see some financial relief when it comes to these two issues?
Well, I think the outlook is mixed. On the childcare front, we have agreements to fund cheaper childcare in place between the federal government and most of the provinces, with the exception of Alberta and Ontario. I think we'll see some movement on getting the rest of those agreements in place and cheaper childcare rolled out across the country over the next few years. That'll have a big impact on household budgets. It's also good for the Canadian economy because it is likely to see more Canadian women getting into the labor force, and that's a real boost for all of us. On housing affordability, I think the prospects look a little more in doubt. All of the parties promised efforts to increase demand for housing by making capital easier to borrow, by making it simpler for first-time homebuyers to tap their savings. All of that boosts demand, which could increase prices. At the same time, we didn't see nearly as much in terms of concrete promises on increasing the supply of housing. We have the lowest per capita housing stock of any G7 industrialized country, and we have immigration numbers going up to their highest ever levels over the next few years. That's going to combine to increase demand while supply is rising slowly, and that's likely to keep prices where they are or make them even less affordable than we've seen in the last few years.
Right. And we're already seeing that immigration starting to trickle in with international students, for instance. Now, what else should we be watching for in the coming week?
Well, I mentioned that we had a bit of a hiccup in growth in the second quarter, and so we're looking at the retail sales numbers for July that are coming out on Friday for a sign as to whether Canadian households are continuing to bring down those big savings cushions they built up during the pandemic and roll that savings into increased consumption and bigger demand that will sustain growth through the end of this year and into next year.
Definitely something to watch for. Thanks so much, Brett.
Great to speak with you.
Great to speak with you too. And we'll have more midweek exchange on Wednesday.